The federal Conservatives have tabled a non-confidence motion and kicked off a debate that will wrap up on Wednesday. Pierre Poilievre is really hoping that that carbon tax vote will bring down the Trudeau government. But will it? To chat about this in more detail is political columnist with The Sun, Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, it appears as though we already know the outcome of the vote, with the NDP saying that they will support the Liberals. What, however, were the arguments that Poilievre was making during his speech to Parliament?
Yeah, look, I don't want to depress anyone who was hopeful for an early election to get rid of the Trudeau government, but barring some unforeseen circumstance, I don't know, maybe people don't show up, maybe uh, the House leaders aren't counting the votes right. This is going to fail. Not that it should, but it will fail because the Bloc Québécois and the NDP have both said that they're going to vote against the Conservative non-confidence motion. So, what were Poilievre's arguments? He was saying things like, "Well, look, our economy is not doing as well as it used to. We are, dealing with the carbon tax. Canadians are not making as much as Americans. Our economy is doing poorer than most." And it's interesting, the Trudeau government keeps coming out and saying, oh, on the macro level, we're doing great. And then Canadians look at the economy and they say, well, wait a minute. About a year and a half ago, unemployment was 5%. Now it's 6.6. Food is about 25% more than it was a couple of years ago. The Trudeau government keeps pointing to international studies and saying, well, the International Monetary Fund says this, or the G7 says that, or the OECD says this. You can't eat an OECD study, Hal. You need to be able to eat what you buy at the grocery store, and that costs a lot more than it used to. And so Canadians are seeing one thing, the Trudeau government is promoting another. That's part of what Poilievre's statement was. He gave a 10-minute speech in French, 10-minute speech in English that basically laid out why this government needs to be defeated. I don't think it will be defeated. And I don't think that anything is going to change because the Bloc and the NDP have decided, despite denouncing the government, that they're going to support them.
Now, the Bloc has been pretty blunt about why they're not supporting the motion. They obviously want a lot of spending for Quebec. But Brian, why did the NDP come out against the motion after calling the Liberals weak and selfish? I mean, why even bother ripping up the supply and confidence agreement?
I mean, this has been the question since what, 2 weeks ago now, that Jagmeet Singh says, I'm ripping up the agreement. Now, look, I call it a coalition agreement. And by any dictionary definition, it is a coalition agreement. The official name of it is the Supply and Confidence Agreement. So if you rip up the Supply and Confidence Agreement, doesn't that mean you no longer have confidence in the government? You would think, but Jagmeet Singh has decided that he's going to vote confidence. He doesn't need to. The Bloc has already said, let's grab something. I mean, that was Yves-Francois Blanchet's statement. Let's grab something. So he's being brazen. He's being out front. He wants a payment in exchange for his party's votes. So Jagmeet Singh doesn't even need to show up. His party doesn't need to show up. They could all have the cold. They could have the flu. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we had a meeting at the time of the vote. Instead, he came out and said he will vote against Pierre Poilievre's non-confidence motion. To what end? You have described the government in the most horrible terms. You have said they do not deserve a second chance, and yet you're going to vote for them. All he's doing is undermining his own credibility going forward.
Now, one of the Bloc demands, Brian, for supporting the government could be pretty popular with seniors here in Canada. They want to boost old age security payments. Do we know if this is likely to happen, and if so, by how much?
The Trudeau government is not saying yes or no to this demand yet, but the basic demand, and the Bloc has many, and some Canadians outside of Quebec will support like this, and others they will be outraged at, and we'll get to that in a moment. But in terms of OAS, it was a year or so ago that the Trudeau government said we are going to increase the old age security payment by 10%. Well, if you're a senior and you're getting OAS, you think, okay, great. But it only applies to those 75 and over. So anyone between 65 and 74 is saying, well, wait a minute, like OAS isn't great. If you're getting the full OAS payment, you are not well off. I think there are, reforms to be made to OAS. We still send payments to people who are earning in retirement more than $100,000. We're still sending them payments. They're small, but they're there. But if you're getting the full OAS payment, you are not well off. And the Trudeau government says, let's increase this by 10%, but only for those over 75. One of the Bloc's demands is you will increase, if you want our votes, you will increase this payment for seniors between 65 and 74. And that's why I say the Bloc could end up becoming very popular with seniors across the country in areas where they really don't like separatism, like Alberta. I mean, if you're a 67-year-old in Red Deer and you're sitting there looking at this and saying, yeah, I'd like a 10% increase, you're going to support the Bloc in this. Crazy as that sounds, but that is one of the main issues. That would cost between $3 and $3.5 billion per year if this were to go forward, according to the parliamentary budget officer.
Now, another reason the Bloc, Brian, will not support the non-confidence vote is that their leader, Yves-Francois Blanchet, says he wants action on oil and gas. Now, what kind of action is he talking about here?
Basically, shut down the oil and gas sector. And so that, again, if you're a senior in Alberta, maybe you're looking at that OAS payment and saying, yeah, I'd like that. And then they say, but let's shut down the oil and gas sector. Ooh, wait, that's bad for the economy of my province. That's going to make my kids unemployed. That's going to make my grandchildren have fewer opportunities going forward. But that is what the Bloc wants. And this is part of the problem. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't think that Justin Trudeau is actually against that idea. I think he's probably in favor of it. That's the problem, is that we've got a Quebec-based prime minister. If you speak to a lot of Quebecers, they will have questions about whether he's a Quebecer or not, whether he speaks good French or not. He's an Ottawa boy who, grew up at 24 Sussex, but he will succumb to their base requests over and over again. And so you've basically got a Quebec-based government that will give whatever is needed to give to a Quebec separatist party, which could end up hurting Alberta in big ways when it comes to the oil and gas sector and elsewhere in order to stay in power. There's no wonder that Premier Danielle Smith is outraged over this. I mean, if I were an Albertan, sometimes I think of myself as an Albertan at heart, but if I were an Albertan, I would be furious with what's going on.
Brian, doesn't Blanchet realize that the oil and gas sector contributes billions of dollars to the transfer payments, which are going to Quebec to help support Quebec?
Oh, don't worry about that. They'll find another way to take money from Alberta and give it to Quebec. I mean, that's basically their attitude. No, they don't worry about this. They don't think about this. It is just a view that you can shut down this industry, which is vital to the entire Canadian economy.
Yeah.
You can shut this down and don't worry about it for a second.
So it doesn't appear as though much will become of the non-confidence vote, so no early election here. But you believe, however, that we could possibly see another non-confidence vote maybe later this week?
Yeah, so the Liberal government has decided that they're going to front load all the opposition days. So the Conservatives have an opposition day today, and there will be a vote on the non-confidence motion on Wednesday. So none of us expect that the government will fall. Unless people are bad at math, the government will not fall. Joe Clark was bad at math. His minority government fell. I don't think that's going to happen in this case. But they've given the Conservatives another opposition day on Thursday. So I was chatting back and forth with people in Poilievre's office and said, why are you bringing forward another non-confidence motion? And they said, well, we don't know that we are, but that is a possibility. So they're going to put forward a number of motions that will be on the order paper later today, and then on Thursday they can decide which one they want to do. So it could be a non-confidence motion on Thursday. It could be something else. Um, they'll call an audible. You and I are football fans, Hal. They'll call an audible on Thursday morning and decide what it's going to be. Uh, it's just a matter of what is good for them politically. There's no, you know, once you've got Jagmeet Singh and the bloc leader Yves-Francois Blanchet standing up and voting to support the Trudeau government, I'm not sure that there's really any political gain to be had from having them do that again a couple days later.
Brian, it was 4.5 years ago that the Trudeau government promised to ban thousands of guns and launch the so-called gun buyback program. Now, it turns out the initiative cost tens of millions of dollars and has not taken a single gun. How do they justify this?
Because they're making the world safer, Hal. I mean, this is what they'll tell you. I mean, it's not true, but yeah, $67 million on the so-called gun buyback program. And look, for all your viewers who are yelling at us for calling it a gun buyback program, I know some heads are exploding over the use of that term. That's the government's term. They said they're going to buy back guns. Well, the government didn't own them to begin with, so it's not, buyback is not, the proper term. But they they said that they were going to buy guns off of people who had them banned. I've got, I don't own any AR-15s. In fact, I don't own any guns. There's guns in my house. I don't own any. But I've got friends who own AR-15s. They have been illegal to take even to the range for more than 4 years. Have you heard of AR-15s being used in crimes in Canada? The impetus for this was the Nova Scotia mass shooting, the mass casualty incident that happened down there in April of 2020. Um, where did that guy who had prior convictions for violent offenses, who was banned from owning guns, where did he get them? He bought them in the United States and smuggled them across the border. And so this is the ongoing problem, is that the Trudeau government does not deal with the real issue. They deal with the issue that will get them votes. That is the issue front to end when it comes to the Trudeau government. It is about getting votes. It is not about what is best for the country.
Brian, social media was lit up after it was discovered that Toronto area schools took their students on a field trip, which ended up at a pro-Palestinian rally. Ontario Premier Doug Ford said it was disgraceful and ridiculous that teachers brought their kids to a rally. How can something like this even happen?
Because we've allowed our school system to be overtaken by activists. And, most of us are just trying to live our lives. We think that the school system is working in our favor. And look, most teachers are great. Most teachers just want to go to work and teach kids how to read, how to write, how to do arithmetic, geography, history, what have you. But then there's this small group of activist teachers. And for anyone sitting, watching us, sitting, whether in Lethbridge, Red Deer, Prince Albert, I don't care where you are. If you're watching and you think, wow, this is just a Toronto thing. No, it's not. This is across the country that we've got a small group of activist teachers who cause problems for everyone, especially our students. And so the permission slip for this, for most students, said that they would not be participating in a protest, that they would be going to watch a protest rally for an Indigenous community called Grassy Narrows. It's in Northern Ontario. Back in the 1960s, they had their water supply polluted by a local paper plant, and it was filled with mercury. They can't fish, they can't drink the water. This is horrible. Nobody would agree with that. That's a horrible thing, and that should be rectified in some way. And yet, this rally ends up with students being told, wear blue to show that you are a settler. Students being handed stickers that say Zionism kills. What does that have to do with a First Nation in Northern Ontario near the Manitoba border? We've got, you know, people chanting and encouraging the students, and we've seen video of this. From Turtle Island to Palestine, occupation is a crime. Okay, so you could look at that and say that's anti Semitic, and absolutely, I think it is. But beyond that, wait a minute, Al. Turtle Island to Palestine, what are they talking about? They are saying that Canada, which they will not name, they'll call it Turtle Island because they don't think Canada is a real place. Occupation is a crime. You and me, most of your viewers are not Indigenous. But these folks are saying that if you are not 100% Indigenous, you are an occupier. What is an occupier? They're a criminal. That's what we're teaching our students. That's what we're teaching young children. That seems completely at odds with what we believe as a society, what we believe as a country. And again, I say to you, do not think that this is just happening in Toronto. This is happening in Red Deer. This is happening in Calgary. This is happening in Lethbridge, in Edmonton, anywhere across the country. You've got a small group of activist teachers pushing this agenda, which is highly political and dangerous for our country.
Brian, we only have about 30 seconds left here, but I want to chit-chat with you a bit about our jet-setting Prime Minister who was in New York recently, appeared on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Liberal supporters are loving it, but Tory supporters are hating or completely ignoring it. What's your take?
My take is that Justin Trudeau is using his trip to the UN, including showing up on the Colbert Report. It was an awful interview. It was horrible, but he's using his entire trip to New York as a domestic campaign message. Look, Trudeau is not resonating with Canadians right now on the domestic front. Sometimes when prime ministers go outside of the country, they end up generating more news domestically than they would if they made the same message somewhere inside the country. And so his message to the UN, his message on Colbert, all of it is directed at trying to get votes here in Canada.
Political columnist with the Sun newspaper, Brian Lilley, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto.
Thank you, Hal.